Hi, everybody, and welcome back. We've been away for the holidays, but we are back. The local time is, 11:46 a.m. And today's date is Thursday, December 28th, 2023. We have more than 300 people live and waiting and ready to go. Here's to you live viewers for remembering. It's been 2 weeks since we've been together, so here's to you. Ooh, that's hot water. Hey-oh. Of course, if you are watching this in replay form, you can scrub ahead to the next chapter title where it says Program Begins, and that will be about 12 minutes from now. But we're going to say hi to some of the local viewers here, the live viewers, live viewers, and looks like we're 5x5, so that's terrific. So where are you viewing from here in late December of 2023? I'll look right here. Why not? Memphis, Tennessee. Oh, boy. Hang on. Omak, Washington, Orcas Island, the Pizza Boxes, Unleash the Floods, Marion, Iowa, Falls City, Washington, Haverhill, Massachusetts, Kennewick, Washington. I'm back a ways. I had to stop the chat. It was going too fast. Quebec, Canada, Orem, Utah, I guess, Squim, Washington. I'm down to live. Things have settled down for just a second. PDX, that's Portland, Oregon. Media, Pennsylvania, with 2 Christmas trees, John. Fairwood, Washington. Sisters, Oregon. Kirk and Philomath, Oregon. Hello, Kirk. I love you too, Michelle. Mission Beach, California. Scottsdale, Arizona. Bastrop, Texas, y'all. Paulsbo, Washington. Oh, okay, we got mostly North American viewers. Is that right? Mostly North American? Good afternoon from Yosemite, says Sean. Buell, Idaho. Heard of it. Janesville, Wisconsin. Plenty of Wisconsin today, by the way, Michael. Budapest, Hungary. That's Zoltan. Maybe we have some of the distant viewers chiming in now. Fresno, California. Brimville, Illinois. Rainy, South Florida. Yeah, you want to see what it's like here? It's no snow. Every day is about the same. It's kind of gray and damp and no snow here. And, I don't mind shoveling. I kind of like some snow. Liz loves to cross-country ski, so she's been bummed out. But that's the way it is this time of year, at least this year. I'm not sure we're going to get much snow at all. Marseille, France. Buck Steele, that's Cedar City, Utah. Hello, Buck. Thanks again. Buck is the guy that purchased the A to Z bookends. Very wonderful gift. Thank you, Buck. Albany, Oregon. Leamington Spa, UK. Rotterdam, Netherlands. Snow-free Montana. That's Sky Cooley, everybody. Hi, Sky. Thanks for joining us today. You working today? Mackay, Australia, Webb Lake, Wisconsin, Albany, Georgia, Teanaway Forest, Rathdrum, Idaho, Miamisburg, Ohio. Oh, Harry, that reminds me of my days at Miami University in Ohio long ago. Christchurch, New Zealand. Hello, Rosie. Glen Cove. How we doing? I guess so it looks like we're doing fine. Can I ask one more time about the 5x5? But I don't see major problems there. That's a relief. Let's catch you up on some scheduling stuff, you early arrival folks. We've got a couple minutes. Let me check all my stations. So here's, I haven't mentioned this yet. Thank you, 5x5, thank you. I haven't mentioned this, but I'll do it right now. Why not? This will just be a little bonus content before we begin today. I wasn't sure. I wanted to go back and make more of these PBS episodes called Nick on the Rocks. You might be familiar with the video series. They're little short 5-6 minute videos featuring geology in the Pacific Northwest, mostly Washington-based stuff. And I was doing those for 4 years. We made 24 of those episodes. And I thought they were okay. People seem to like him, but it's a different audience than this. This is kind of a hard car audience. So I had to be essentially talked into resurrecting the series by the PBS station in Seattle. And I'm very glad that I did, because I found a kid, Brady, who's, hang on. I found a kid, Brady, who is very talented, and he's new to the series. So these older episodes were made by Chris Smart, who's older than I am, and Chris has retired. But Channel 9 in Seattle has now been putting a new episode out every every Thursday night. I guess tonight is the next one. And this episode here on Moses Cooley, I'm very pleased with. The first two, we were just, Brady and I were getting to know each other, basically. I don't think these were particularly good. I did one at Drumheller and one at Saddle Rock above Wenatchee, but the brand new Moses Cooley episode that we filmed back in June, and I was already thinking about Brett's and reading the old Brett stuff and everything, but I was really happy with that one. So anyway, you can click on this and watch it for free on YouTube. It takes you to the YouTube channel. So that's that. Okay, thank you. So I've been meaning to mention that. So scheduling wise, we are back to this schedule. I suppose I'll remind everybody at the top of the hour, and here we are. And I'll see you again, hopefully Sunday morning, 9 a.m., which happens to be the last day of 2023. But we will just continue motoring on through the rest of the alphabet. That is the plan. And there will be a guest on Sunday. There's no guest today. A couple more hellos to you. All my stations are working, right? So I spent a little time over the break tidying things up in the office. I've got a new batch of posters to show off. I got a couple mugs from Kirk that I pulled out of his gift box and swapped them with a couple of mugs that I've already done. So this is Kirk's Tsunami series. Kirk is a viewer here live right now. Keeps that water hot. What can I say, Kirk? Is it asbestos lined or something? It was like still scalding hot 5-10 minutes later. I'm impressed. All right. Yep. Okay. So Waynesboro, Virginia. Keep an eye on the clock, boy. Menominee, Michigan. Orlando, Florida. Why don't I accept super chats? Niagara, is that what your name? I lost you. I like to keep this free. It's a long list now of why I like to keep this free, but it makes me feel good that this is free and open to everybody. And the money thing just gets in the way. And so when I started doing this 4 years ago, pandemic, I can say 4 years, can I now? It's almost 4 years ago. It was just something to keep me going. And I think it worked for many people who were trapped at home, and it just kept us going. So it didn't feel right to charge money for that. And then that got established, and I just think the money thing would ruin it. Now, you might disagree, but for this stuff, it doesn't cost much money to put these things together. I've got the equipment that I need, so I wouldn't even know what to do with your money. So I appreciate the intention there, but I like to just keep it, to keep the money out of it. That said, I'm probably going to do a fundraising video with Hannah Shamloo in the next few days. That's for scholarships here on campus in the geology department, but I've been thinking very carefully about that. So that's probably coming, but it's not money for me. It's money for the students. All right. So that's coming in the next week, I think, or so. Couple final thoughts, and then we will. I got to get my head right. I got to take a walk and get my head right. We still have Sky. He hasn't left yet. Who else do we have here? That's Dale, and there's Oscar from San Diego, and M. Hans Liebert. Now I'm just reading people's names. I don't know why. That's kind of a fun change. Eric Hutton and Pamela Pilling and Crown House and Lorena Rios and Roy Hobbs. Roy Hobbs. I can't think of a line from that movie right now. Hobbs, get in there. Sean Luther, Lori Nelson, Rock Tapper Robin. Have I ever just listed people's names or read people's names? That's kind of obnoxious. Okay, good. Well, I'm so pleased that things are working. I had everything unplugged over the break, but looks like we're all set to go. And I'm excited for today's episode, but I have to get my head right. So let me give you a shot out the window. Say thank you one more time. Thank you for joining us live. It means so much. We have 700 now, and we'll start the program in 3 minutes. Thank you. Okay, now, boy, just think this out. You're just by yourself today. There's nobody else you have to think about. It's just you and the audience. You don't have to be in a rush. You don't know exactly how it's going to go, but you're just going to just kind of let it flow. Just start opening your mouth, start talking a little bit, and it's all there. The content's there. You don't know the order. That's all. But just follow your instincts and your audience. The audience is on your side. They're rooting for you. Pressure's off. Just go for it. Hot mic. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. It's high noon on Thursday, December 28th, and this is episode K, Multiple Ice Advances. I think that's what I called this one. I'm excited about this episode for a number of reasons. I think I've made some connections that most have not made before, and that's from reading that I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. Yeah, we took a couple of weeks off for the holidays, and I hope that everything is going well with you and that you had good time with family and friends. But school has not started again, but I'm in here, and I like getting up every morning and doing a little bit of productive stuff. And for me, productive stuff means working on geology stuff. So I've been planning really for the next 4 episodes every day over the holiday break. And because of that extra time, I've made some connections that I'm excited about. Now, we'll see how excited I continue to be as the letters wear on, because this is an alphabet series, right? This is A to Z, and this is letter K, so we're almost halfway through the alphabet. And I'd like to do essentially 2 things with you today. The first is to reset the goals of the series, give you a little bit more detailed explanation about why I'm working on the Ice Age flood stuff. I mean, I've said it generally over the last few letters, but I want to be a little bit more bold, I think, and a little bit more specific today. And then I'd also like to introduce you in a very real way to a main character that probably will be with us the rest of the series. And his name was Thomas C. Chamberlain. T.C. Chamberlain. And most of my adult life, I've known about Chamberlain because I'm from Southeast Wisconsin. He was from Southeast Wisconsin. He was the president of the University of Wisconsin for a time. There was all sorts of reasons to hear about multiple working hypotheses and all sorts of things that made Chamberlain's work famous. But I never really took the time to sit down and put his timeline together. And the reason that that's important for this series is I think we have a new major influence on J. Harlan Bretz. Don't get me wrong, Israel Russell was an influence and was the guy to convince Bretz to move out to the Pacific Northwest. But the new leader in the clubhouse for major influence on J. Harlan Bretz is T.C. Chamberlain. They spent 10 years together working closely at the University of Chicago. Now, Chamberlain was quite a bit older, but Chamberlain was the guy before Bretz's intersection with him that did major work on establishing the idea that there were multiple advances of the Canadian ice sheet into northern U.S., into the lower 48 states. So we're going to look at some of that detailed history. We're also going to realize that it was Chamberlain who was thinking about astronomical stuff involving sun-earth position business. So I think that's one of our answers as well, that Bretz dreamt up this number of his Spokane flood happening 125,000 or 130,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago because of his intimate relations, because of his connections with T.C. Chamberlain. I'm also going to throw in a little bit of personal history into this episode because the amount of Wisconsin history that is in this episode intersects with my life and my family's life. And you might think that that's a weird choice, but you know, what we're doing here, you and I, is a rather unusual thing. I'm looking into this black dot, but I'm essentially talking to you and you're looking at me. Now, most of you I'll never meet flesh, face to face in the flesh. We'll never meet. But this is as close as we can get. And there's a bit of a connection here. I think it's safe to say that. You keep coming back, watching these live or in replay. And so if I bring some of my personal connection to places or actual people, I do it, it's on purpose because I feel like that's a way for you to connect with this material. Like it's some sort of Kevin Bacon thing, and there's two stages or whatever the phrase is to get you from you to T.C. Chamberlain, let's say. So hopefully this episode works for you. It's a solo episode. I'm taking my time, obviously. I've already decided I'm going to spend 5 minutes just teasing the whole thing, which I just did. And we're going to get to the details right now. First detail is please come back. We are on our schedule now for the rest of the alphabet. Here we are Thursdays at noon, Sundays at 9 a.m. Those are times, Pacific times. And sure, here we are. We're going to squeeze in one more episode before the end of the year. I'll see you on the morning of December 31st, and we will have a guest, Kelsey Stanton from the Washington Geological Survey. And then we'll get into January of 2024, and onward we go. Here's one way to reset our goals for the series. So if you go back, I don't know if you've been watching all these episodes. Maybe you watch every one of these episodes live. I think some of you do. Others of you watch the replays, and maybe this is your first one live or whatever. But ideally, you're watching these in order. And so way back in session B with Jerome Lessman, we kind of laid this out. And these are my 4 big questions. I've been mostly working in this neighborhood so far in the alphabet. I've mostly been just trying to follow Bretz's life pre-1922 and figuring out what he was writing, what he was reading, and who he was writing letters to, essentially. So we've been in this area quite hard, and we're going to continue to be in this area quite hard. And you're saying, why 1922? Well, that's mostly where the Bretz story begins. For most people that hear the J. Harlan Bretz story, it starts in August of 1922, and Bretz starts taking the blindfold off and looking at the geology of Eastern Washington. Well, what I'm trying to do is do half of the alphabet before we get to that point. And it's been supremely satisfying to this point for me personally, and hopefully for you too. We're going to be here and here today. So we're going to do a major effort in getting us to think about some of Ice Age flooding activity, or at least glaciation, before 30,000 years ago. And indirectly, that bears on number 1, and we'll save number 3 for down the road. Okay? One more verbal tease, and then we go. Why am I doing this alphabet series this winter on the Ice Age floods? The prior 3 alphabets, I assume now you've been watching for a long time. Do you remember the last 3 winters? That was different than this winter. The prior 3 alphabets, the prior 3 winters, I was doing 26 episodes a winter just to learn about exotic terrains so that I didn't sound like a dumbass around the campfire when I was collaborating with these North Cascades geologists. In other words, back in 2019, I was asked to be part of a National Science Foundation grant, and I was the public outreach person. Yeah, I'm talking about the Dream Team, Mike Eddy, Stacia Gordon, Bob Miller, Aaron Donaghy. You haven't heard those names in a while. But those prior winters, I was just learning what I could and get up to speed, and I wasn't really asking for help. I wasn't really involving you trying to make some breakthroughs. This winter is different for a number of reasons. I don't have a National Science Foundation grant on the Ice Age floods. I'm not motivated by some sort of grant or some sort of research team. No. But there are reasons that I'm digging in deeply. I've touched on it a little bit. I want to do it more, not with you now. Okay? So here's the one question. I want to be as bold as I can without pissing people off. Here's the one question I have for the rest of the alphabet. Are you ready? What the hell happened to the Spokane ice sheet? You want me to clean it up? Sorry, Patrick. What happened to the Spokane ice sheet? That's my question for the rest of the alphabet. Here's a map by J. Harlan Bretz, published in the early 1920s. Here's the city of Spokane, Washington. Here's Davenport. Here's Rockland. All these dinky little towns. Here's Peach, Egypt, 9 Mile Falls. Okay. So Bretz, throughout the 1920s, has a major ice sheet that he called the Spokane ice sheet on top of Spokane, Washington, and coming directly from the southern margin of this Spokane ice sheet, he has the floodwaters carving the channeled scablands. 'Scablands. But Bretz was saying in the 1920s that that Spokane ice sheet was not the most recent ice advance, that it was an older ice sheet advance. And therefore, Bretz is saying in the 1920s, these major ice age floods, you get it? Ice age floods A to Z. Bretz's Spokane floods were not the most recent. Everything is blue. Everything is older than 30,000 years ago on this very old map from J. Harlan Bretz. Yeah, the Mondovi Horseshoe, baby. Let's do it. I didn't make that connection until the last 6 months, that Bretz was doing this famous work in Eastern Washington, but not talking about the most recent ice advance. And that's the driver for not only this episode, but the rest of the alphabet. Let's keep going with the slideshow. So here's another way to say how I got interested in this. These are some video clips. There's no sound on these, but hopefully you can hear me. This is Tom Foster and I. Turns out it's the last video that Tom and I made together, called Glacial Lake Missoula. We're pushing 10 years ago now. And I'm up here at the big capital M on top of the, we have problems with focus. Can I check real quick? Are we okay? Are we 5x5? Do you have problems with on your end? Most say 5x5, so I'm going to continue. There's T.C. Chamberlain, by the way. So the idea is, I got into this business about kind of conflicting evidence, some issues here, some unresolved stories with that filming of the Missoula flood episode. Let me show you my notes for today. I wasn't planning on showing you this, but I'm improvising right off the bat. So what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to hit this hard. And I'm showing you 3 video clips that got me interested in this discrepancy between what I was hearing from experts and the general Missoula flood story. So I just showed you this silent clip. I'm going to show you another one from 2021 and a third from just a few months ago. But my point in showing you this is that in all of these cases, whether I was emailing with people to do the work on the Missoula flood video, the Glacial Lake Missoula video, or whatever, I'm distracted by all these comments about blurry and everything else. I'm just going to ignore that. I have to ignore it. The idea is that I was hearing from everybody, I thought, that there was an early and a late story. That the 9 Mile beds at Glacial Lake Missoula were a late story and relatively delicate compared to this huge pile of flood gravels at Tarkio in the floor of Glacial Lake Missoula, where there was some sort of earlier, much more energetic story. When I did this next clip with Brian Atwater, I was just confused because we were looking at these amazing lake sediments from Glacial Lake Columbia, but they were also incredibly delicate. I'm like, how can these things be here if they're recording major floods? And we eventually got to the point in the video where Atwater's like, hey, you do realize that the simplest explanation is to cut the Grand Coulee with energetic megafloods long before we bring in these lake sediments. And I'm like, what? I've never heard that. So let's go to that. Same idea. I don't know if I'm going to keep this little technique, but I've just grabbed some clips from these videos. So here's Brian Atwater in Steamboat Rock. And if you haven't seen these videos, you can find them online. So this is the moment at the 1 hour mark of this video that Atwater's like, I kept asking questions about why are these delicate beds here? Like these are incredibly varved little sediments. And he's like, these beds are not recording the mega floods. Essentially what he was saying. These are tiny little things, and there's glacial till that's sitting in the floor of Grand Coulee. So again, we're back to the idea that up there at Steamboat Rock, there's some sort of earlier energetic story and a late kind of wimpy story. Hope you're still with me. The third version of this is just a few months ago, another video clip, no audio. I'm just talking over the top of it. I'm literally holding up a Brett's map, just kind of without even planning to do it. It just happened to be in my pack. And as I'm holding it up to the camera, I'm like, well, obviously this is wrong. This ice sheet over the top of Spokane, pointing to it right now and saying, well, obviously geologists don't believe that anymore. Brett's must have been wrong about that. But we know that there's young ice over the northern Washington, but not here. And that was the moment when I turned off the camera. I just sat there. I was waiting for my Geology 351 students to show up. And I'm like, looking at this map, like, wait a minute. Brett's is calling that thing the Spokane ice sheet. Does he really mean that the Spokane ice sheet was older than the Wisconsin ice sheet? Turns out the answer is yes. So again, an older and younger story, and it's the older story, according to Brett's 100 years ago, that's the major action. And so, we have a color scheme now. So I feel scattered, but I'm trying to just basically pull out some of the main themes that I thought were very interesting from the first half of the alphabet and just do it in a different way so that we can really see where I'm trying to go. It might have been a mystery. It may have felt super, speaking of scattered, before Christmas, it might have felt like very scattered, like we're doing a show on the Astoria Fan, and before that, Google Earth, and before that, Puget Lowland. Like, is there any scheme here at all? Okay, well, here's the idea. So thanks to the last show, I now have a coloring scheme, and I have dates that I would like to use. So just play along with me. We're going to just keep using this over and over again. So I'm not going to spend forever on this. This is our first crack at looking at this. So red is going to be the Vashon ice in western Washington, and it's going to be the Okanagan ice in eastern Washington. You're like, this isn't new. We've already done this. That's marine isotope stage 2 from the last episode with Joel Gombiner. Orange for the Possession. Blue for the Double Bluff, again, in Puget Lowland in the western Washington area, MIS 6. But this is a new date for us. MIS 12. Why did I jump to that? Why didn't I just do MIS 8? Defiance, that's Kathy Trust's work. She thought maybe MIS 8. And there's a new date for us. And there's a fourth. So this is essentially trying to take work that's been done by Brett's, Bailey Willis, and a number of other geologists, and combining it with the work of Joel Gombiner by email since the last episode. I'm still trying to reset the episode. We're not to T.C. Chamberlain yet. We're not to Brett's yet. But I'm hoping that you're seeing some connections that we haven't made before, right off the bat. Let's go back to the slideshow. Here's this map where Brett's is saying this is the Spokane ice. The margin, he's got it dashed. The approximate margin of the Spokane ice over Spokane, Washington. Here he's got a solid black line for the edge of the Wisconsin moraine. He calls it the Wisconsin moraine. Here's the Grand Coulee. And here's his dashed approximate limit of the Spokane ice. So what have I done? I've tried to take what Joel Gombiner was doing in the last episode, which is saying, did you catch this from the last episode? I really enjoyed the last episode. If you haven't seen it yet, I strongly encourage you to do it. We were in the Pacific Ocean. we were looking and talking about marine isotope stages and the sediments in the floor of the oceans of the world to record those marine isotope stages. And this is partly under my head here. This plot from Joel is partly under my bubble head, but the biggest and strongest glacials are recent. And if we go back 1 million years ago, 2 million years ago, 3 million years ago, yeah, we had glacial advances, but they were less pronounced according to the interpretation of this marine isotope stack. So what am I getting from Joel on this? Well, I emailed Joel and basically said, this is over the holidays, December 19th. Joel, I loved that episode that you did. Would you be willing to approximate dates from the marine isotope stages? What are kind of the working dates that I can use from this point forward in the series? And Joel played along. And he's got some caveats here. You can freeze the frame and read this if you want. But Joel says, I think MIS 16, 12, 6, and 2 are the 4 strongest glacials. And he, again, from the marine data, is picking these 4 numbers that we're going to use. And I love this. I almost entitled this episode this, Mega Glacials equals Mega Floods. So you remember last time I was saying I now teach that there were 33 advances and retreats of the ice over the last 2.6 million years. And technically that's true. But if you look carefully at the marine record that we were doing with Joel last time, we have multiple ice advances and retreats. But there were 4, that's the current thinking on how to interpret these marine records. There were 4 particularly strong ice advances. And you're like, well, really? Just 4? Isn't that what you were taught 50 years ago? Isn't that what I was taught 50 years ago? That there were 4 major advances of the ice sheets in the continents? Well, we're kind of back to that if I'm hearing Joel correctly. And so if I go back to this thing here, I'd like, unless I'm forced to change my mind somehow, I'd like to go with these 4 dates. These are just nice, simple dates. Instead of even a range of dates, I just want to use these 4 numbers as we continue to talk about evidence for multiple ice sheet advances. And yeah, there's MIS 4 that may play a role in this. But the thing I really want to do is then cut to this idea. I hope this is working for you. I feel like I'm getting where I want to go. It's a little bit more jumbled than I wanted, but let's just keep it going, baby, okay? So this is another way to say what I'm trying to say now that we have our color scheme. Brett's in the 1920s is saying, here's the state of Washington, here's Seattle, here's Chelan, here's Ellensburg, here's Spokane. And now using Joel's dates of 20,000 years ago for the Wisconsin, that's red, right? And 150,000 years ago for blue. And you're like, wait a minute, 150? I thought you said 130. Well, again, we're using the most recent view of marine stage records. And that's too many words. I'm just going to say stage. Stage 6. I hereby declare from this point forward, when I say stage 2, you and I are going to know that I mean marine isotope stage 2. And when I say stage 6, I mean marine isotope stage 6. Okay? I guess I'll bring that up a few more times, but I want to get to that kind of shorthand. Well, look what I think Brett's is trying to say. He's like, sure, I have a case for major ice age flood erosion in the channeled scavlands, but I've got that water coming out from the front of the Spokane ice sheet 150,000 years ago and draining to the Pacific Ocean through the Columbia River Gorge. And Brett's is also saying I have the Admiralty ice advance that went further than the Wisconsin. Again, if we're saying today that's 150,000 years ago, perhaps there's some major amounts of water coming down the Chehalis, MIS 6, heading to Aberdeen. But the shocker, and there are going to be some geologists now, if they're watching this, who are going to be uncomfortable with this. And I'm not trying to be too forceful, but I am trying to be true to what the papers of J. Harlan Bretz were saying in the 1920s. And it all goes back to Chamberlain, is what I'm eventually building toward. The thing that might be hard to stomach for many geologists, including some guests who are going to show up later in this series. Bretz is saying, yeah, we've got the younger than 30,000-year-old ice advance. That's Wisconsin ice advance 20,000 years ago. Yes, we had Glacial Lake Missoula at the time, but here's the idea that, is there some flooding during the Wisconsin time? Is there red flooding? Yes. It's wimpy. It's minor. It's not the major story. Older, major, younger, minor. And the working idea I'd like to work with in this series to the rest of the alphabet is the Glacial Lake Missoula story minor? I wasn't kidding around. I want to be bold. Is the Glacial Lake Missoula story, and therefore the Missoula floods, a late and minor story compared with these bombastic floods with a huge ice sheet that extended even a little bit further, the Spokane ice sheet versus the Wisconsin ice sheet? And we might have guests who are geologists in the room right now pushing back and going, well, you know, there may have been a bunch of Spokane flood deposits, but the Missoula floods were impossibly large and they erased everything. But we talked about that with prior discussions earlier in the alphabet. I'm just trying to frame it slightly differently. So you want me to be really dramatic about it? If you say no, I'm not going to listen to you. I want to be more dramatic than ever. I want to basically do this. Vashon in Western Washington, Okanagan Lobe in Eastern Washington, red. There's some orange. There's some orange, some MIS4 till, the possession till that's basically underneath the Vashon till. That was the point of the Kathy Troost video. It didn't extend further south than the terminal moraine of the Vashon at Tenino, Washington. I know of nobody finding orange till, stage 4 till in Eastern Washington. It might be there someplace. I don't think anybody's positively identified it. But the main question, remember my main question the rest of the winter? What the hell happened to the Spokane ice sheet? What the hell happened to the Spokane ice sheet? Why in the 1960s did this just get removed from the story? Is it worth considering putting it back? And you're like, I still don't think I see the significance of this. I'll say it a different way, and then we'll move on. If we get this Spokane ice sheet back, and we say that the Spokane ice sheet is the major story as the source of the water, then suddenly we're not talking about Glacial Lake Missoula as the source of the Ice Age floods in Eastern Washington. But if you remove the Spokane ice sheet from the story, then you're just bringing water in from Montana, and that's the whole story. It's red water coming in from 2 states away, and that's doing most of the damage. Basically, I'm asking, is this a subglacial flow story? And Bretz was working on that all through the 1920s, to the point where he crossed the border, got into Canada in the field seasons of 1925 and 1926, looking for volcanic deposits that burned a hole in the bottom of the Canadian ice sheet and created subglacial floods, Yokulips. And is that the Spokane flood story? And you're like, I've never heard that before. You're right. You haven't heard it before. Did Bretz find what he was looking for? Maybe, maybe not. Did he publish what he was finding for? No. Why not? Well, in the middle of all that excavation, exploration, writing out these thoughts, he experienced the ambush meeting of 1927, and suddenly everything changed. And he got off of that subglacial Canadian story. Is it just a shift in focus? Or is there something else going on? I can't hold it. I'll say it right now. Who was the first guy? Who was the first guy? Pop quiz. Who was the first geologist to visit Western Montana and find evidence for a glacial Lake Missoula, and thinking potentially that there was an ice dam in northern Idaho that held back glacial Lake Missoula? What's your answer? J. Harlan Bretz? Incorrect. What's your answer? Joseph Pardee? Incorrect. Before Pardee, and you can read it in Joseph Pardee's 1910 paper, T.C. Chamberlain, the mentor of J. Harlan Bretz, came up with the idea of glacial Lake Missoula in 1886. Why is Bretz ignoring glacial Lake Missoula as an explanation at all until the late 1920s, if his main advisor is the guy who came up with the idea? So I've had success getting old letters and old notebooks from the University of Chicago. I think there's a bunch of old letters at the University of Chicago in the collection of T.C. Chamberlain. I think that's my next move. Can I find some letters that Bretz was writing to Chamberlain? Maybe somebody's done this, but can I find some letters, some correspondence between Bretz and Chamberlain in the 19-teens and 1920s? They knew about glacial Lake Missoula. His freaking advisor came up with the idea. That's new to me. So, like, there's connections we're making today, but there's also significant questions. Let me finish with my little arts and crafts time. Hope you're enjoying this. So, if this is our talk today of multiple ice advances in Washington, and we know the coloring scheme one more time: red for here, blue for here, purple for here, brown for here. That's brown, dark brown. According to Joel Gombiner, using the marine record, these are the most likely four major megaglacial times, and therefore the four most likely mega flood times, at least as a working model. Well, I got a little carried away. So I took our little color scheme in Washington with Western Washington and Eastern Washington, even threw the little purple thing back in. No, I'm not going to cut this out again. And you remember from the participation from the viewers, we had some blue extending farther than red in the panhandle of Idaho. I think that was it Ken maybe in Idaho? Sky Cooley in Western Montana has got blue extending farther than red. We're guessing it's blue. But look at the work that was done further east. And for the rest of today's episode, we're focusing on this work. This has got T.C. Chamberlain written all over it. And yes, I'm using today's marine stages as our best guess for these distributions. And this is the famous driftless area of southwestern Wisconsin. Okay, can we catch our breath for a second? I got a bunch of slides. I'm just getting warmed up. I happen to glance at the live chat and I see talk of Noah's flood and everything. So, like, I don't know. I have no idea where you guys are. Are we okay 5x5, first of all? Can I just pause that way? I keep seeing out of the corner of my eye stuff about blurry and focus and everything. So I want to stop thinking about that if we're good. And you can talk about whatever you want in the live chat, but the Noah's flood thing. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. That's, I think, the end of the awkward stage. It felt awkward to me, but I think I delivered what I wanted to deliver. Let's go back to the slideshow and really pick it up now. Famous last words. Thank you, Joel Gombiner, for being willing to play along with what I want to do. So again, I forget about my bubble head here, but here's Joel saying, yeah, we've got the is it Antarctic? Yeah, the Antarctic ice core in light blue. This is from the last show. The marine isotope, and here's stage 16, stage 12, stage 6, and if I can get my fat head out of the way, stage 2. And there's our color scheme as well. Let's just keep rolling with it. Also from Joel, if you look at the Astoria fan, there's a bunch of sand that was dumped out there equivalent to stage 2. But there's a bunch of sand that got belched out there at the mouth of the Columbia River, apparently, that equates to stage 6. Or maybe this is me, just a little conjecture. I'm trying to read the tea leaves here. Maybe I'm being a little bit out of line here. But one of the major points from the last episode is that we've got a bunch of sediment that looks like it's from Ice Age flooding that's too old to be in the MIS2 story. All right. Yep, timeline, a little bit of viewer report stuff, a little bit of memories from Brett's. I decided to do it this way this time. So if we jump back, I'm reminding you there's 4 years of high school teaching with newlyweds, Harley Bretts and his wife, Fanny. And Fanny and I reached Puget Sound in Western Washington while it was still a bit primitive and unspoiled. There were no bridges yet across narrow inlets, no auto highways, no airfields. There was also 3 large steamers, the Clipper between Seattle and Tacoma, the Rosalie between Seattle and San Juan Islands, and the state of Washington, a paddle boat or paddle wheel boat between Seattle and a number of little ports along Hood's Canal. I remember the main room of the old state being full of people at night, sleeping in chairs, waiting for the 1 a.m. return arrival to Seattle. Yeah, they didn't own a car. They're getting around by their own boat or these ferries going across. All right, so that's when Brett's is collecting his field notes. We've already covered it. Then we realize that Brett decides to be a geology student for real. For the first time, he's studying geology at the University of Chicago. And here are his mentors, Salisbury and Chamberlain. Chamberlain is the head of the department. Salisbury is his right-hand man. In fact, Salisbury is his right-hand man through most of his life. These guys are interconnected throughout their entire lives. Yes, they're both from farms just a few miles from where I grew up on the farm in southeastern Wisconsin. Here's Brett's with one old man memory of Chamberlain. This anecdote was current when I first became a University of Chicago graduate student. In the barest details, T.C. Chamberlain was taking a morning constitutional on the Midway when he was brushed by a faster walker. He could see no reason for the man to jostle him. The walk was wide. Suspicious, T.C. felt for his watch pocket. It was empty. Breaking into a run, Chamberlain caught the man by the throat and demanded, "Give me that watch." The man handed over a watch and promptly ran away from the big geologist. And when T.C. Chamberlain arrived home, he found his own watch on top of the chest of drawers. Insert laugh track. Another question. We're going to see all sorts of overlap between Brett's at the University of Chicago and T.C. Chamberlain. I have two questions. Why is that the only memory of Chamberlain in 100 pages of memories of Brett's? Brett's, as a 90-year-old, is writing all these fond memories of his whole life as a geologist. He talks about Salisbury a bunch. He talks about other folks. He talks about his enemies. That's the only memory of Chamberlain. So it doesn't seem like Chamberlain was this incredible mentor, this major professor that many of us have. What was my other question? It'll come to me. I can't remember it. Thanks to Trevor Contreras, Washington Geological Survey, who said, yeah, I've got a copy of the Brett's PhD. It's actually written in German or something involving German. I didn't quite follow the story. Sorry, Trevor. I don't remember the story. And so we can confirm that the two main professors, if you are unaware of the schooling idea, if you go to graduate school and you do a thesis or you go and get a PhD, which I have not done, but if you go get a PhD, that's called a dissertation, you have a committee and you have professors who are on your committee, and they are very heavily involved in your writing and your advising. And so the two main people on Brett's committee to get his PhD at the University of Chicago are these two guys, Salisbury and Chamberlain. Why isn't Chamberlain more of a, that's my other question. Do you remember when we got into Israel Russell? And I asked something like, if Russell had lived another 20 years, wouldn't Russell, who's so famous in the geology world, wouldn't he have stood up for Brett's? And Brett's wouldn't have had the struggle that he had because here's this major cheerleader behind him, Israel Russell. Well, I got the same question here. I think Chamberlain is as influential, maybe more influential than Israel Russell. And Brett's is getting a PhD under Chamberlain. Why isn't Chamberlain all over the place defending Brett's? And you can say, well, Chamberlain's too old, and the ambush meeting and all that, but there's no evidence at all of Chamberlain and Brett's collaborating on this floods idea all through the 1920s. I have the timeline here coming in just a second. I'm having fun. I hope you are too. I don't know how to pronounce Chamberlain's middle name, by the way. It's not Crowder. I've been corrected by a bunch of people. There's an H in there. Crowder? Chowder? All right. So thanks to Trevor for that. Keep it going. So yes, the PhD was published in this form by the Washington Geological Survey. And then we have, in the last episode, talked about this 1-year chapter when Brett's is a brand new professor with his newly minted PhD, and he goes to the University of Washington. We're not going to do that whole story again, but I'm going to throw in a couple of tidbits that I learned. One are memories from Brett's. Again, old man memories. I'll just say old man memories. We're going to do this a lot. He's over 90 at this point. Basically, and you can freeze this if you watch this in replay and read this carefully. Brett said basically Willis was wrong. I'll read part of it. Brett's talking. I studied the glacial history of Puget Sound. I had denied Bailey Willis and George Otis Smith's interpretation of an area between the unquestionable Puget Lobe drift and the basal slopes of Mount Rainier. Willis and Smith named it the Osceola Drift from a Mount Rainier glacier. I called it a waste slope deposit, moved to present position as a mud flow avalanche accumulation, which, in my view, has been supported by later investigators. So I'm apologizing to the family of Rocky Crandall. Rocky Crandall in the 1950s, that's his famous story, that he was sitting there in the White River Valley and like, well, what's this deposit all about? And I'm in Puget Sound and it's supposed to be a glacial deposit, but light bulb goes off over my head. I think it's a mud flow. Apparently Brett's Apparently, Brett's had the idea 40 years before. All right, sorry about that. Brett says, I saw Bailey Willis while I was a faculty member at University of Washington just for a year. And Willis said that I had spent the last few days seeing some of the places where I had differed from him and Smith in my then newly published thesis. Said Bailey Willis, I have been saying to the exposure, hello, Bretts. And God dang it, Bailey Willis never got nearer to admission that he and Smith were wrong and I've been right, now wearing a PhD for the first time in my life. All right. So, yeah, a little bit of bad blood between Bretts and Saunders at the University of Washington. I'm reminding you that we found Bretts' house that he built before things got sour between Bretts and Saunders. If you want more of this, that's in the last episode. Really fun find. Thanks to the viewers. I zoomed in on Google Maps to see the side of Bretts' house, and he actually had this amazing profile, and there was a bunch of stuff in the live chat. I think that's maybe Baker. I think that's Hood or something. Well, one of the viewers emailed me and said, no, I think if you just go to Google Maps, man, and you get on the north side of Google Maps, here's Little Tahoma, and here's Liberty Cap, and here's a couple bumps down below. So nice job by the viewer. Thank you. I don't think I'm going to read these, but again, if you're watching this in replay, you can pause and read some of these semi-nasty comments by Bretts in his old age, thinking back on why he had such trouble with Ed Saunders. And Jim O'Connor, who's going to be a guest in a couple of weeks, has this jewel of a letter from Bretts to Julian Barksdale at the University of Washington. And Bretts is saying in 1976, the biggest regret I had in leaving the University of Washington was the love my wife and I had for Puget Sound country. I had already contributed 2 new houses to Seattle. I didn't know he built a second house, but whatever. And, I guess I'll read it. At the outstanding objection to my remainder of the department of that day was the entrenched position of that stick in the mud, Ed Saunders. The department chair, Harry Landis, commented to me in discussing the matter that Saunders didn't have the urge or ability to learn more than he knew of geology or teaching methods. I, having earlier reached the same judgment, he and I agreed that the department would never function harmoniously if I remained. Saunders had tenure. I didn't. So that's one explanation for why Bretts left Washington. But regardless, he goes back to the University of Chicago and spends the rest of his teaching career and the rest of his life tied to the University of Chicago, now as a professor, initially an instructor, then an assistant professor, then an associate professor, and finally a full professor. And again, these are the 2 guys that he was working with on a daily basis. As I understand it, Salisbury was Bretts' immediate boss, the department chair or whatever, assistant principal, basically, I don't know. But again, there's hardly any mention of Chamberlain, even though Chamberlain is there and he's this mythical figure among many. Here's what the campus of the University of Chicago looked like at the time, apparently. And we'll be doing more with the University of Chicago students and courses in the next few episodes. But now we are to the point where I'd like to do a deep dive with Chamberlain. And I want to tell you again why I'm doing this. Chamberlain, before he ever met Bretts, is the main guy to document multiple glacial ice advances. And let me just hit it as hard as I can. When Bretts comes to Washington, he's looking for multiple generations of ice sheet advance. Multiple ice sheet advances in Western Washington, and multiple ice sheet advances in Eastern Washington, and he found them in both places. I don't think it's an accident that his main advisor, before he does this field work in Eastern Washington, is Mr. Multiple Ice Sheet Advances, T.C. Chamberlain. I didn't have that before. And it wasn't just Chamberlain. It was the fashion of the day. And before I leave you here and go back to the slides, that's ultimately my question. When I ask what the hell happened to the Spokane ice sheet, I think another way of asking that question is it just out of fashion to think about multiple ice sheets of different ages? In Eastern Washington, did we just stop talking about these older ice advances just because it wasn't hip? You're like, that's a dumb question. It's like, I don't know. Just like anything else in life, things kind of get into the terms of the day, thoughts of the day, and some of the history of the thoughts are lost. I'm not trying to be rebellious. There was such a strong case for these older ice sheet advances, as we'll see, that I have a hard time believing that there just was not. I have a hard time believing that there was just one ice sheet advance in Eastern Washington. Let's just put it that way. All right, TC, we're going to you. This is your life, Thomas C. Chamberlain. This is the deep dive that I did all Christmas break. I'll try to keep myself under control. So here are some of these beautiful old maps. And I'm going to stop myself again. I hate this swapping thing. So if we go to nickzentner.com, I'm completely out of control today. So we're not clicking on Brett's today. We're clicking on Flood's today. And this is episode K, is it not? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 papers for you, including Joel from the last episode giving all of his beautiful charts and maps. But I've got some beautiful original papers in the 1880s that I dug out of some of these annual reports by Chamberlain, terminal moraine of the second glacial epoch, the driftless area of Wisconsin, T.C. Chamberlain. I mean, it's all here in black and white. I managed to dig these out and share them under Chamberlain's direction. Frank Leverett, who's going to come into the story in Eastern Washington later, with a monster more than 500-page document in 1899 on the Illinois glacial lobe. I won't go through each of these. There's an old textbook. Chamberlain and Salisbury wrote a textbook, a college textbook. You can read the whole frickin' textbook, man. You want to take a Geology 101 class in 1909 or something? Here's the book. It actually is 1909. Good job, Nicky boy. There's memories after Chamberlain passes away. There's modern papers. What is this? Oh, it's a modern paper looking back at Chamberlain. Sorry. Here's my old geology professor at Wisconsin, Dave Michelson, in 2019 with some stunning LiDAR imagery and some maps with some more current views of this sort of thing. I've got some of this coming for you in just a second. But I just want to let you know that there is a ton more here, even Ice Age models, summarizing some of the pioneers of Ice Age models from Louis Agassiz to Milutin Milankovitch. And again, Chamberlain is right in there with these guys thinking about what's driving all this climate change. Really fun to put that together. Okay, how do I find my slideshow again? I really got to figure this out. I ran into this problem last show. All right. We're going to stay here for quite some time. What am I doing? Right. Thanks for your patience. Okay, so Chamberlain. Beautiful old maps. Now, here comes some of the personal history. There's a place called Zentner Road. It's just like it sounds. It's where my family settled. near New Glarus, Wisconsin. So here's the farm where my family grew up and where I lived as a baby. Here's the farm that I worked on near Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin for most of my life. And this is where I spent most of my youth, but my first couple of years were back on the original homestead. Well, Salisbury grew up over here. Chamberlain grew up on a drumlin over here. This is the Illinois line. And then here's the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Here's University of Wisconsin Whitewater, back then a normal school. Here's Delavan High School. And here's Beloit College. And here's Baraboo, Wisconsin, where Bretz is doing his September fieldwork with his undergraduate students at the University of Chicago. So my main point is that my history in southern Wisconsin is intimately associated with these guys, even though there's like a year separate. I'm officially tired of this. There's my dad. I'm not tired of my dad. There, I'll just keep it like this. I got to go to the document camera. Come on, Docky, save me. So this is something I did this morning, and I kind of like it, if I can get it to frame properly. Screw it. This is the part that's maybe overkill, but I just needed to make sense of this from my own head. So let me try to explain the best I can. T.C. Chamberlain grows up in Beloit, Wisconsin. Goes to Beloit College as a student, graduates in 1869. His first teaching job is at Whitewater. And after Chamberlain's death, his son, Rollin Chamberlain, writes this beautiful memoir. And I do want to read a little bit of this with you. So here's Chamberlain in later years thinking back to his first job at Whitewater. T.C. Chamberlain, I still look back upon the beginning of my work at Whitewater as among the halcyon days of my life. To be sure, it was a stage of small attainments, but it was as full an endeavor to get on and get more than was worthwhile as any later days. And the fruits were just as sweet, for no fruits are perfect. They are merely pablum on which to grow. He then starts working for the Wisconsin Geological Survey, which had just started in 1873, and was teaching part-time at Beloit College. And Chamberlain was assigned southeastern Wisconsin, where he didn't really feel like there was much to look at. There weren't iron deposits or other kinds of precious metals, but that's how he got into this glacial geology business. Throughout his life, Chamberlain kept dealing with his former students and co-workers and made opportunities happen for all those guys. So King is a big name in geology back in the day. That's one of Chamberlain's first students at the University of Wisconsin Whitewater. Here's Salisbury, Van Hise, Pumpley's out here in the West. All these things go through this guy Chamberlain. But Chamberlain, the state of Wisconsin, demanded that when Chamberlain write his reports, that he writes to the masses of intelligent people who are not familiar with the principles of geology. And your volume is to be written in clear, plain English, plain language, with explanations of technical terms, and to be properly illustrated with maps and diagrams, and to be so arranged as to constitute a key of the more perfect understanding of the whole report. I'm going to continue to be scattered here today. I hope this is working for you, but we're going to have some live Q&A, and if nothing else, your questions are going to remind me about certain things I wanted to cover in this episode. I love this episode. I just want to make sure it all gets out of my head and my mouth to you. And so when we do some live Q&A, that might be a way to kind of mop up some of the details that I'm forgetting about. Thank you. There's apparently a very fine, I think my dad had this, a 3-volume set, Geology of Wisconsin. I don't know what happened to them. My dad passed away 4 years ago. The Kettle Moraine is a big part of this story, and it's the Kettle Moraine of southern Wisconsin where TC first realized that there were multiple generations, like all these glacial deposits are not the same age. So he mapped a little bit in southern Wisconsin, Chamberlain did, working for the Wisconsin Geological Survey, and then he went to Europe to present his results at some sort of international conference in Paris. And upon returning to Wisconsin, he soon came to recognize that the prominent Kettle Moraine crossing the state in looped festoons divided an area of later glaciation from that of an earlier one. He thus recognized that the problem was more complex than he had supposed, and that it reached beyond the scope of a single state survey. Soon, Chamberlain's Wisconsin glacial studies merged into the broader investigations which he started when he was appointed the new Glacial Division chief of the USGS. So the famous names continue, like who noticed Chamberlain working for the Wisconsin Geological Survey and publishing these fine books? John Wesley Powell, man. And Powell says, I'm going to take you and make you the main Glacial Division guy. And Chamberlain, you're going to start mapping from Montana to New England, and you're going to follow these glacial deposits that you know so well in southern Wisconsin. You're going to try to follow them to the west and follow them to the east. And that's exactly what he did. He couldn't do it all himself. So back to my timeline, if you can follow some of this, this is Salisbury, and this is Brett's. So Chamberlain is 15 years older than Salisbury. And you're like, you haven't talked anything about Salisbury yet. Well, here's why. Salisbury's younger. Salisbury went to Whitewater, but missed Chamberlain by a couple of years. Then at Beloit, Chamberlain was the advisor or the main mentor to Salisbury. And in 1881, both the mentor, Chamberlain, and the student, Salisbury, jump ship and go to the USGS. And yet, since Chamberlain left Beloit College in extreme southern Wisconsin, Salisbury took over for Chamberlain, who was the main geology department chair at Beloit College from 1881 till 1891. And then at the University of Wisconsin, he was there for just 1 year before he jumped to Chicago. If you can read my chicken scratch, this is where most of the nationwide glacial deposit mapping that Chamberlain did in the 1880s. And then finally, the University of Wisconsin said, look, you're a homegrown guy. You got your start working for the Wisconsin Geological Survey. You owe it to us. You need to come back and be our new president of the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And in the fall of 1887, Chamberlain finally did that. And again, after a 5-year run as president of the University of Wisconsin, both Chamberlain and Salisbury left. Basically, it's Chamberlain saying, look, I'm going to take over and build a program at a brand new university, University of Chicago, and Salisbury, you're coming with me, and you're going to be the main guy for me. Okay, if we go back to this, I'm scared of this screen, so I'm just going to do it this way. So yeah, those are those places I just ran through quickly, but it's all happening. This is, it takes an hour to drive from Madison to Milwaukee. So this is, my whole family, all my folks, all my people are still back in this neighborhood. My sister lives here on the other side of the Kettle Moraine, and so on. So I involved my dad just slightly here because he would have loved this session. I don't think he knew much about Chamberlain and Salisbury, but especially in his later years when his health was declining, I would go home 3 times a year to visit my folks in Wisconsin, every March, every July, and every October. And we would just go on drives. And my dad knew every county trunk in southern Wisconsin and every hill, every drumlin. And we would just talk about glacial geology the whole time. So much of this would have been thoroughly enjoyed by him. So, Carl Zentner. The first time I leaned on the viewers was back when I was doing live streams from home, and I asked the viewers if they could help me figure out something my dad and I could not figure out, which is, when did Nick Zentner, this is a photo of Nick Zentner, when exactly did Nick Zentner come from Elm, Switzerland and arrive in southern Wisconsin and build the family farm on Zentner Road? And viewers in Switzerland helped me out reading Schweizerdeutsch, and we figured it out. He came over in 1864 during the Civil War, something my dad swore never would have happened. And so the family history is part of this as well. But you'll see that my grandpa coming over, this is my great-great-grandfather, Nick Zentner, in the 1870s and 1880s looked like this. Didn't speak much English, I think. And here's Chamberlain back in the 1870s, rocking the same kind of look. So these maps wait for you. All this incredible detail is waiting for you with these scientific papers from more than 100 years ago. These are like 150 years ago now. And photos like this of what these glacial till deposits and glacial outwash deposits look like. This is a photo from TC in 1883. Are you kidding me? This poorly sorted glacial material near Whitewater, Wisconsin. And, you know, this is our farm here. This is in Fort Atkinson, just 5 miles away, in living color. Same kinds of deposits. So, you know, I made a video back in the pandemic time talking about the drumlins there and trying to make sense of what I was taught long ago at the University of Wisconsin. This is the farm I grew up on. And this kind of lush scene that are completely made out of glacial till and glacial outwash tell the story of multiple ice advances, not just one. I mean, the connections between the Midwest and some of these unsolved mysteries out here in Eastern Washington are really incredible. This is not my dad. This is just a few months after my dad died. So this is a neighbor coming over and cutting the second crop. Okay, Carl. Goodbye. Back to 1883 and photos that Chamberlain is taking in southern Wisconsin. And in print, he's starting to document an earlier glacial episode and a later one. It's almost like this needs to be blue and down here, and this needs to be red and up here. He's starting to see it. And these maps get more and more pronounced. And now, because of his work, Chamberlain, because of his work with the USGS, he's starting to trace and follow these terminal moraines to other states. And it's not all him. He's got his army of former students, basically. By the way, the red is the Lus on this map. We're going to get to the Lus at some point. A more modern version, I think this was done by the Wisconsin Geological Survey recently. I love this map, and I'm using our color scheme now. Are you viewing from one of these areas? Are you aware that this is the current view of multiple ice advances? And I'm guessing that this purple stage 12 is accurate. I think it's conventional now to just say pre-Illinoisan, but I don't really know. Of course, everybody's going to want to know about this, and I don't have an answer. Chamberlain didn't have an answer, and I don't think anybody even today has an answer for why. This is not a mountainous area, but this is where Zentner Road is. That's where my grandparents lived. I knew when we were drive from my hometown, Fort Atkinson, took an hour as a kid to get to New Glarus. And it took forever, of course, as a 4-year-old. Like, are we ever going to get there? Just laying in the back seat, no seatbelts, of course. And I knew we were getting close if it got a little bit more up and down, because it's not as glaciated. It's not glaciated in the driftless, but beyond that, it's still a bit of a mystery. Jumping to Glacial Lake Missoula, that's a weird jump. Well, remember, in the 1880s, Chamberlain has to go from Montana to New England, according to John Wesley Powell's orders. Oh, I jumped the gun. I mean, if my dad had seen some of this LiDAR imagery, look at this. This is southern Wisconsin. I mean, this is cartoonish. This is laughable. These are some of the county roads in southern and central Wisconsin, sorry, forgive me. I've never seen these till yesterday. I didn't realize the LiDAR was this crazy. And what the hell that is, I don't know. Seven Hills Drumlin. Why does that look so different? I jumped the gun. Here's the point. We haven't introduced Pardee yet. We will in a couple of letters. He's writing this paper in 1910. The object of the paper is to show that in comparatively recent time, an ice-dammed lake filled a large portion of the drainage basin of the Clark Fork in northwestern Montana. And I asked Sky, do you know how to find the original work by Chamberlain? I still haven't found it. Viewers, can I ask some help, please? Buried in the 7th annual report of the USGS, I think the date for the 7th annual report is 1885, maybe 1886. Buried in there somewhere is the original publication of Chamberlain with these original ideas about a glacial Lake Missoula. I've never seen it. And I, for some reason, couldn't get to that document, that 7th annual report last night for some reason. So if you can help me there, I appreciate it. So Sky says there's a thesis by Chambers that says as early as 1885, Chamberlain in western Montana described terraces on the sides of the valleys of the Flathead Lake, series of parallel watermarks, conceived of the idea of a glacial ice dam. Yeah. I'd like to get that original work. But here's Pardee in 1910 saying that as long ago as 1885, Chamberlain noticed a curious phenomenon. And Salisbury, the former student of Chamberlain, was in personal communication with Pardee. Bailey Willis is in that story somehow. So if nothing else, what can I say just to keep you going here? We still have more than 900. Was Bretz this rebel? Was J. Harlan Bretz this person who was just a loner and working way harder than everybody else and doing all this field work in Eastern Washington, a place nobody knew? And was he just dreaming up these crazy ideas and then he communicated them to the mainstream geologists and they said, no, that's impossible, and it became very ugly? I think in some circles, that's how to tell the story of J. Harlan Bretz, that he was some sort of loner, an outsider, basically. Well, if that part of the Bretz story appeals to you, I think it's inaccurate. Because who are we talking about? We're talking about Bretz, who's now a colleague of Chamberlain and Salisbury. We're talking about Bretz, who's meeting with Bailey Willis and talking about the Osceola, whether it's a mud flow or a glacial outwash deposit. We're talking about Bretz visiting with Israel Russell in his home. Bretz is teaching through all this. Bretz is a student through all this. Bretz has students through all this. He's not an outsider. He's at one of the most impressive geology departments in the country, University of Chicago, with these very famous people. And yet he has no support when it gets real in 1927. He has essentially zero support in paper. That's the part I don't get. Keep it going. Yeah, just in the references listed by Joseph Pardee in 1910, here's our names. Calkins is in there somewhere. I don't know much about Calkins, but he's part of it too, and Culver. Okay, Chamberlain. Yeah, man. Couple final touches on this, and then we're going to come to you, the viewers. I'm almost done. This is an important building for me personally. Again, I've already explained why I feel like I want to include myself in this a little bit. This is a building on the University of Wisconsin's campus. And here's what it looks like today. It still stands. It's called Science Hall. And it opened up in the fall of 1887. Chamberlain shows up at the University of Wisconsin. He's the new president. He's a geologist. There's a brand new science building, and all of the science departments are in that building. Now, did Chamberlain have an office in Science Hall? Probably not. But was Chamberlain a major part of the innards of Science Hall? Was he teaching and having meetings with faculty? He had to have been. And you're like, well, why is that important? Well, I was 19 years old, totally lost, a college sophomore, a college freshman. I was at, you guessed it, University of Wisconsin Whitewater, living at home, driving every day to Whitewater for that first year. Very immature, not into school. The only A I got was in a geography class, I remember. And so I went to Wisconsin. I went to the University of Wisconsin, and I was a geography major in this building. And you walk up those steps, you go in the front door, you go up half a floor to the main landing, you hang a left, and there is a beautiful old classroom right here in the south, what would that be? The southeastern corner of the main floor of Science Hall. This is what that classroom looks like. It still looks this way. It's still being used. And I had many of my classes in this old building. Ignore the phone, please. So this auditorium with these old wooden seats, I still remember those wooden seats. I always sat way in the back, way up here in the corner. I'd be daydreaming out the window half the time. Chamberlain was in that room. Chamberlain was the president of the university. He was in this classroom where I was a totally lost student taking glacial geology classes from Dave Michelson and others, Jim Knox, and Francis Hole with a bow tie, playing a violin in class, Francis Hole. So there'll be more of this personal history with Wisconsin because, of course, this stuff all kind of reconnects once over and over and over again. But this room, and I skipped through a couple of pictures, but I wanted to get to the main guts of that. So this is room 360 in Science Hall today, where I took a bunch of advanced geography classes. I still remember that room very carefully. I'm sure Chamberlain and many of these guys were in that room. And again, this is room 180. I don't think I said it. This is room 180. Getting greedy now. Viewers, anybody live near Madison, Wisconsin? Does anybody want to go during a school day and get into room 180 of Science Hall? Maybe between classes or something? Could you take a few photos for me, please? I'd like some better photos of that room. And I can smell that room. You know how memory is. I can smell that room. That was an important room for me, and it was the main place to hang out, even in 1870 Sorry, 1888, 1889, 1890, when Chamberlain was running the show there. Room 180 of Science Hall, University of Wisconsin. Those old maps, the whole thing. Great stuff. This old classroom still exists as well. I took English 101 there. Okay, I'm cutting some of this short. This is a bit much. But Chamberlain started something called an Ag Short Course in the Stock Pavilion. And my grandpa, Red, during the winter of 1927-28, took the short course. And here's Grandpa Red with his cow, everybody else with their cows. So the University of Wisconsin took their role in spreading education to the residents of the state quite seriously. So Science Hall, very good. A little bit on Salisbury, and I think we're close to being done here. Here's Salisbury in later years. This is at some conference. This is not the University of Chicago faculty. I couldn't find a good photo of Salisbury. They're all kind of mean-looking photos. Hopefully he smiled at some point in his life, but he had the scowl figured out back then. This is a jewel of a photo from 1897 taken by Diller. Diller's a big name out here in the Pacific Northwest, but this photo was taken at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. I found this last night. And in this one photo, I assume these are all USGS guys, 1897, who do we have? George Otis Smith, Bailey Willis, John Wesley Powell, Rollin Salisbury. University of Chicago, a fertile place to be learning geology and then to be teaching geology. And that's essentially where we are in this story. Come on, Salisbury. Come on, RD. We're skipping these kind of memories of Brett's. I'm going to save that till the next episode, but I'm going to go to one last thing, and that is a couple more little timeline things. So now that you've been thoroughly introduced to Chamberlain and Salisbury, and we already know J. Harlan Brett's, it's 1892 when Chamberlain and Salisbury start University of Chicago's geology department. Shortly after, in 1893, Chamberlain and Salisbury start the Journal of Geology, which is the main publication where most of Brett's papers were published and edited by these two guys. Salisbury dies suddenly. And you know what I forgot to put in here? Chamberlain retired in 1919. So Brett's purple pen. (1914). So I overstated that just a touch. I'm catching myself in real time. So Brett's is starting a faculty position at the University of Chicago in 1914. And he has 5 years as a colleague, as a co-worker with Chamberlain. And he only has 8 years with Salisbury because Salisbury dies suddenly on August 15th, 1922. Where's Brett's during the month of August, 1922? His first field season in the Scablands. So from the notebooks and Google Earth Glen, which I'm going to start to use next episode, we know Brett's doesn't suddenly return back to Chicago because of this sudden death. He stays till the end of August. But there's suddenly a change. I don't know who takes over as department chair and who is Brett's new boss, because Chamberlain has retired and Salisbury has suddenly left the planet. But Chamberlain is around, presumably, and there's, more than a decade where there could be Chamberlain really sticking up. I'll put in one more thing. The famous ambush meeting where Brett needs anybody to stick up for him is January of 1927. And so by that point, Chamberlain is in his last year and a half of life, and I guess it makes sense that he doesn't stick up to him there. I'm not even going to look. You know what? Let me just try. I was going to say I'm not even going to look at the rest of my slides, but we'll save the Baraboo stuff for next time. Thank you, Thomas C. Chamberlain. This photo of Chamberlain right before he perishes. And in our next episode, it will be Brett's starting to get set up with his University of Chicago students in the Columbia River Gorge. And we will be in this neighborhood with these years for the next 3 episodes. This is Chamberlain's son, who interestingly he named Rollin. And so Rollin wrote that wonderful memoir of TC a few years after Chamberlain's death. Yeah, I wanted to get to this point. Here's a little note. You should know this guy if you don't. If you live in Washington or the Pacific Northwest, there's a very enthusiastic ranger for the state parks named David McWalter. Occasionally, he's in the live chat with us. And I got a nice email from David a few days ago, and he's been watching and enjoying this series. And he says, I just want to let you know that I'm open this winter, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday between 10 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. all winter at the Dry Falls Visitor Center, which is in the Grand Coulee. And if you're not in the area, you know that we basically have no snow and the roads are fine. And I think the weather forecast, can somebody punch in the weather forecast, please, for Ephrata, Washington on this Sunday? If it looks sunny, I think I'm just going to go up there and hang out. And if you want to visit with me and David on Sunday, if the weather looks good, if there's some sun in the forecast for this Sunday, I think after the live stream with you, I'm just going to celebrate by turning the camera off and just driving the hour and a half up to the Dry Falls Visitor Center. And so if that sounds like something you want to do on the last day of December, you can get over the pass or whatever. It'd be fun just to hang out with some folks. And David says he has warm drinks available to share, an occasional unhealthy snack to enjoy the view in the middle of the winter. 0%. Okay. Uppercase, please. Let's do some live Q&A before we quit today. I think there was a bunch more I had, believe it or not, but I think my gut says this is the good place to stop. Ken, Alfred Anderson from Moscow, taught at Nix, Idaho State University. Okay, thanks for that connection. Looking for some questions, please. Jeff, why would earlier glacial advances not also produce Lake Missoula's? Good question, Jeff. I have Larry Smith lined up for this episode, for this series. And Larry Smith has done a lot of work on the sediments in glacial Lake Missoula. But we'll ask him that. Is there a stage 6 version of glacial Lake Missoula? Is that possible? Is there a reason that's not possible? The answer is more likely we just don't have the deposits from that age. North Scotty, could the Spokane Glacier have created early floods from same question. Interesting. Okay, let me scroll back. I'm just looking for uppercase. Will, might the driftless area be an outwash remnant? There is some, I always say it drives me crazy when people go, actually, it's a pet peeve of mine. You say something and then somebody always has to come, actually, it's not quite right. I think in 1984, I said driftless area and somebody went, Actually, there's outwash in the driftless area, so it's not technically the driftless. Okay. So there's a little bit of glacial outwash down some of the rivers going through the driftless area, but I would love to learn if there's a convincing answer for why the driftless area exists. But the glaciers just missed southwestern Wisconsin, and I think it's still a mystery. Thank you. David, is there long enough between the four largest glacials for calcrete to form? Now, that's an interesting question. Let's table that one, David. I don't think so. But let's continue to think about the time it takes to develop calcrete, which I think is hundreds of thousands of years, according to Sky. Sky might have an answer for you already in the live chat if he's still with us. I love that. Thank you. Dan, does the math formula work for the talus issue? Answer later. Yeah, Bretz was really into the talus business, and I think even he got away from that as a way to measure time. That's coming in the 1920s. Do you need, I'm going to come back to your questions in a second, but do you need, I'll wait till the end. I'll just say it verbally. If you're getting impatient with me, January 11th, we're going to be in Spokane. The series will be finally in Eastern Washington. January 11th, mark it down. We're getting there, I promise. Whatever letter that is. Not interested in live streaming. I just want to visit with folks, Saber. Thank you. It's midnight in India. Hello, Shreyas Jossi. It's great to have you here briefly. Roger, what evidence for the Spokane sheet is stage 6 versus stage 12 or stage 16? Excellent question. We've got to put that one on hold. As far as I know, there's no till that everybody agrees is Spokane. And that's part of the drama here, is that trying to decide that this stuff that Bretz was convinced was glacial till from Spokane time, everybody now goes to those outcrops, I guess, and they go, well, no, this isn't till. I think even Bretz does some of that. Any exotic material found offshore, like from the Midwest? From the Midwest, if you mean offshore in the Pacific Northwest, I don't think so. But are you thinking like at the mouth of the Mississippi? I'm not sure how to handle that question. Sorry. What is automatic scroll? What is Bretz's scope of the ice sheet thickness at his time? I don't think he ever. In Western Washington, Price, I think Bretz was using Tiger Mountain near Issaquah as the highest level of where the ice was depositing erratics. And so therefore he was making a case that the ice sheet in Western Washington, at least during the red time, was 3,000 feet thick. But I don't think he was talking about ice thickness in Eastern Washington at all. I know it's off topic, but would there also be multiple ice advances much further east of the Pacific Northwest? It's not off topic, and hopefully you saw that today, that you can find older ice advances in the Midwest. Most of southern Ohio and southern Indiana, I didn't realize it when I lived there, but I guess that's older. That's pre-Wisconsin glacial deposits. Papagino, is there a single site to access national? I don't know. Don, family cabin in Door County, Wisconsin, collect chain coral and honeycomb. Did the Wisconsin glacier go from coast to coast? Yeah, you can think about it that, Don. Yeah. Continuous Canadian ice sheet from coast to coast. I guess there's debate about the inland ice-free corridor or whatever, but yeah, you can think of it that way. There is a computer model of the Missoula floods, but it's kind of, yes, there are some simulations. Sky Wonders, was Roland Chamberlain named after Roland Salisbury? Has to be. Why did Brest return to Chicago? I think I tried to say what I know, Cameron, which is he didn't get along with the faculty at the University of Washington's geology department. And then at the same time, in his personal memories, he's saying Salisbury and Chamberlain hunted hard for me to come back and be a faculty member. I don't know which is true. What happens if 1,000 people show up at the visitor center? I'm sure that would be a fun time if it happened. A couple more. This was my favorite episode yet. Cheers to Carl Zentner. Thank you. Don't make me emotional now. Did Chamberlain think of catastrophic floods? Arjan, thank you. Where are you from, Arjan? Arjan Husabos. I know of no... It's an interesting question. There's a lot of Chamberlain to read. And, I've given you basically 3 papers. 2 papers and a textbook that Chamberlain himself wrote. If Chamberlain was talking at all about outburst floods, I think I would have heard of it by now. But he was talking about this glacial lake, Missoula, with an ice dam, apparently. Now, at some point, I was reading, it was one of those memoirs after Chamberlain died, where somebody said, Chamberlain never liked an ice dam idea. Like a temporary ice dam, but not like a permanent ice dam to make a huge lake. I don't know. That seemed conflicting from the narrative. But a direct answer to your question is I know of no place where Chamberlain is talking Ice Age floods. 3 more and we're done. Buck, do the various shorelines of glacial Lake Missoula represent the thickness of the ice dam? Unsure, Buck. We'll go back to that as one of the main reasons I'm doing this live stream series. I emailed pretty much everybody I could think of in the spring of 2015 who knew anything about the Missoula floods. And pretty much everybody took the time to reply to me. I'm just a teacher in a little Cowpie State University, and I don't think I was nearly as visible as I am now. But everybody from Richard Waite to Vic Baker, everybody emailed. I have all those emails. And I was just shocked as I was writing that little script for that Glacial Lake Missoula episode or video. It's about 18 minutes long. The most basic questions didn't have answers, including those shorelines. Like, isn't that the first question? If you see a dozen shorelines at different elevations above Missoula, Montana, isn't the most obvious questions, are they all the same age? Is the oldest one at the top? Is the youngest one at the top? Your question, is every former shoreline a different ice sheet with different elevations? Apparently nobody knows. Here's Chamberlain in 1883, and I guess there hasn't been much progress on those shorelines since then, I guess. I don't know. And that was the beginning of me. It's like, wow, maybe I should look into this Ice Age flood thing. Some stuff's, the most basic things are just not adding up. Questions about Sprague Lake. We'll wait on that. Thank you. One more. Questions about my dad. Scrolling way back. Zoltan in Hungary. Last question. Was the Spokane Till washed away by the Missoula floods? Now, that's a fair question. And most geologists that you ask, they'll say yes. And the answer might very well be yes. That if there truly was, let me finish with my little Thank you, Zoltan. If this truly was the thing, and the Spokane ice sheet crept further south than the Wisconsin ice sheet, as Bretz was saying back in the 20s, and this water is coming directly from the base of the Spokane ice sheet, there must be some till here then. Or even there must be some outwash trains that are coming away from this ice front. Bretz is saying this is all the major action from this ice sheet that was major. Zoltan in Hungary is saying, even though Bretz's story is that this was a minor story, did this come and wipe all this Spokane ice till away? And the answer is mostly yes. However, here's a cliffhanger for all of January. If you're saying, where's the blue pen? Let's see if this works for you before I toast you. Ready? I think I have it right here before I forget. I have it right now. If you're saying, Bretz, that the Moses Coulee and the Grand Coulee and the Telford Crab Creek and the Cheney Palouse tracks, if you say those are all being carved during this 150,000 year time, that means that you're saying that the Grand Coulee is completely carved out before 100,000 years ago. If you're saying that, and you're saying that the Wisconsin red pen Glacial Lake Missoula story is late and minor, then this water is not going to be able to come up and over this place where the Spokane Till is, because you've carved the floor of Grand Coulee deep enough to siphon all of this Missoula water across the area and out. And so, Zoltan, if you agree with Bretz that most of the excavation was done 150,000 years ago and not 20,000 years ago, you know where I'm getting those numbers, then the answer is no. Then the answer is no. This Spokane Till should be here because it's high and dry, and we can do as many Missoula floods as we want. It's going to stay to the Spokane River and the Columbia River and the Grand Coulee because the elevations for red are lower than blue. Now, I got to be careful before I toast you. I'm just following Bretz's logic and what Bretz is writing in the 1920s. I'm not saying that's the current understanding. You're understanding me, right? You're hearing me? I'm exploring an old set of ideas that have essentially been discarded by geologists in the last 60 years. And I'm just wondering if we really want to discard all of that work done by a person who has spent weeks and weeks and weeks in the field. And he learned from somebody who did weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks in the field 40 years before him, looking at evidence of multiple ice advances. A toast to you. Here's to you for showing up today. Here's to your health. Here's to Joe Gombiner for his email and sending me some key dates that we were using today and will continue to use, unless I hear from Joel saying, stop using my dates. I didn't know you were going to use them that much. Here's to Joel Gombiner. Here's to Sky Cooley and Jerome Lessman, who have been helpful by email and text pretty regularly over the last few weeks. Thank you, fellas. Here's to a group of people in Eugene, Oregon area who all converged on a research library doorstep, strangers to each other, and started taking photos of some papers from a Thomas Large collection, spearheaded by viewer Joey. Spearheaded by viewer Jody F. The story on that comes in a couple of weeks. But thanks to those guys for a very interesting collection of letters that they have been emailing me. Here's to the health of your family and friends at this special time of the year. I appreciate your time. Looks like we still have more than 850 people. And before I sign off, let me show you the schedule. Oh, what was the weather? What did we decide? Should I just go to it? Let me just go to it quick. Come on, man. Mostly cloudy, good enough for me. I hereby declare that this Sunday, December 31st, if you want to hang out with me at the Dry Falls Visitor Center, David McWalter, the ranger, will be open starting at 10 a.m. I'm not going to be there at 10 because I'm going to be doing this on Sunday morning. But I'll be done with Kelsey, our guest on Sunday morning, December 31st. I'll be done with Kelsey by 11, and I'll be to Dry Falls Visitor Center by 1 o'clock. So I'll be hanging up there early afternoon with whoever wants to hang out and just visit. No filming, nothing like that. Just whoever wants to show up, we can enjoy a warm beverage provided by David and just enjoy his visitor center and support what he's doing. David McWalter, Dry Falls State Park. Okay, everybody. See you on Sunday. Thank you for joining for this episode. I love you, and goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Happy New Year a few days early. T.C. Chamberlain. See you Sunday morning. Have a good weekend until then.